title, leaving 27 people hospitalized, including 2 who are in serious conditions. Police say the incident, which occurred just minutes after the team's bus had passed through the city center, is not being treated as terrorism. The driver, identified as a 53-year-old white British man from the Liverpool area, has been arrested. Officers described the collision as an isolated incident and confirmed that they are not looking for any other suspects. Let's listen in.
Know that people will understandably be concerned by what has happened tonight. What I can tell you is that we believe this to be an isolated incident, and we are not currently looking for anyone else in relation to it. The incident is not being treated as terrorism. Stopped at the scene, and a 53-year-old white British man from the Liverpool area was arrested. We believe him to be the driver of the vehicle. Extensive inquiries are ongoing to establish the circumstances.
4 children were among those taken to hospital. Emergency crews had to free at least 4 people trapped under the vehicle. Let's listen in.
4 of the injured were children who were enjoying the day with their friends and their families. We can confirm that our teams treated 20 patients at the scene for minor injuries, and these did not need hospital treatment. 27 patients in total were taken to hospital by ambulance, and we believe 2 of those, including 1 of the children, have sustained.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer has called the scenes in Liverpool appalling and said his thoughts were with the victims and their families. Liverpool Fan Club issued a statement expressing solidarity with those affected. The incident came on a spring bank holiday, with hundreds of thousands gathered to celebrate the team's first title parade since the COVID-era trophy win in 2020, when public festivals were all banned. We have Professor Madhav Nalapat joining us as an editorial director of the Sunday Guardian. Thank you for joining us, Professor. What do we know about the driver and his motive so far?
Well, frankly, the police haven't released much information, but I am a bit appalled by Prime Minister Starmer's comment of just being appalled. It's much more than being appalled. It's absolutely horrifying. And if it's not an act of terror, I don't know what is an act of terror. You have a vehicle blowing into a crowd, you're part of that crowd, you have a festival mood, and then suddenly this vehicle comes and, running over people left and right. If you're a normal person, you'll feel terrorized. I mean, it is an act of terror. Now, my point is that acts of terror are not committed only by people of one ethnicity. They're committed by people across multiple ethnicities. So you cannot give a free pass to anyone just because he's of a particular ethnicity. And frankly, you immediately come to the conclusion of lone wolf attack. How would we know? Has he been part of some a group that has been exchanging messages about this kind of thing? Has he been radicalized by some radical political or religious group? We don't know any of this. But you cannot jump to a conclusion within, hours of the incident that it's not an act of terror. In my view, it's very much an act of terror, unless he was under the influence of alcohol or something, and he was not really fully, he was inebriated while driving. If that's so, then clearly, there are other circumstances. But if he were in his senses completely, it's certainly an act of terror. So I would like to say that I do hope, I'm sure the Prime Minister Starmer will investigate thoroughly, and I'm sure if a linkage is found, they'll all be thoroughly investigated. The British police are very efficient, and I'm very certain they'll get to the bottom of this problem.
And Professor, to sum up what you just said, how are authorities describing the nature of this incident, accident, or deliberate?
Well, I simply want to say that I'm sure that whatever the public comments, they're dealing with it in a very serious manner, because frankly, this is reminiscent of attacks that have taken place, similar vehicle attacks, in which the vehicle has been used as a terror machine. You'll remember that box knives were used by the 9/11 terrorists. Box knives, small little things, they were used to very horrible effect by the terrorists. So the reality situation is, I'm sure investigation is going on, and I'm sure it's now branching out. And once they find if there's any linkage, then obviously they are going to investigate that. Otherwise, possibly they're right. This is a lone wolf attack, but frankly, it should be described as an act of terror. Tomorrow, if somebody comes from Gaza or Lebanon and does the same thing in Britain, and you call him a terrorist, and you don't call this gentleman, I'm using niceties because I think we should use niceties on television. If you call this individual, not a terrorist, then what would you call them? So the reality is, it is an act of terror, no matter how you label it. And I'm very sure the British police and the London Metro Police and the other police departments will be collaborating to ensure that this is solved, because you cannot have a gang on the loose. Prime Minister Starmer will not have a gang on the loose. And what is very worrisome is that it's happened, it's happened in a terrible way. And it's when people were in such a happy mood. And this is exactly the definition of an act of terror in my textbook. Thank you.
This leads me to ask about the fact that this was after COVID, this was the big main event after so long. Professor, what security measures were in place during this celebration?
Look, clearly they were not sufficient. Clearly they failed to detect this individual speeding towards the crowd. And clearly there was a failure of intelligence, and there was a failure of reaction by the police. Very large crowds especially in Western cities, need to be safeguarded. Otherwise what happens is life will come to a frozen halt. And that, of course, the intention of these terrorists, that life in Western societies comes to a halt. Social life and other kinds of life. That's why you go to bars, restaurants, roads, festivals, that kind of situation. So I'd like to say that I'm sure that they are investigating all that thoroughly. And I'm sure if there is more to be seen, we will hear about it. Because I'm quite sure Prime Minister Starmer will not keep that under the carpet. Thank you.
And what's the latest on the victims' conditions? Do we know anything else so far about the victims?
Look, the number is just 2 of people who are seriously injured. That's really a great blessing, and that's all we know, because quite frankly, you have a lot of information on social media, different people giving different views, but I'm not going to dignify that by quoting them. But the reality is that we have to go by the official report, and the official report says there are 2. But in my view, something like this happening, I'm surprised that there's only 2. There are only 2 people who are seriously injured. I would have expected much more, but I'm very certain that by the look of it, I would have expected much more. And with just 2 individuals, including tragically a very young individual, well, it's very tragic. But it's amazing that more people were not seriously hurt.
And building on that point, has Liverpool fan club or local official issued any statements about this?
Look, we have got the bare facts of the situation, and that's about it. That's all I have been able to access. But I'm sure they're working hard on it. They are well prepared to face acts of terrorism, no matter who perpetuates them. And I'm very sure they're working hard on solving this problem. And if the person is a lone wolf, well, then so be it. Thank heavens. But if there are others involved, I'm very certain Prime Minister Starmer will be very upright about it. And so will the Liverpool police. They'll be very upfront about it. But they would like to retain their credibility with the British public. not just Liverpool, the entire world, especially in Britain, will be watching this in horror, in shock and horror. So they would want to ensure their credibility continues. So there will be I think the facts will come out. It's only a question of when the facts come out. Thank you.
Last but not least, Professor, what's next in this police investigation?
What next is that they'll be checking the records of the internet records, and they'll be checking his social register, and they'll be going through that with a fine-tooth comb, and then they'll be checking on those he is contacting frequently, especially those he contacted just before he did this attack, and they will be investigating that very quietly but very thoroughly.